welcome back. We invite you to join us once again for a walk through the royal city of Kraków. This is already our fifth walk together, and today we'll explore Kazimierz, a district full of character, which for centuries was home to two cultures, Polish and Jewish. It is this diversity that continues to enchant visitors with its unique atmosphere, architecture, and ever-present spirit of the past. Please remember you can find additional information and maps on our website. The link is provided below the video. And now let's begin our walk through this extraordinary district of two faiths. Up next, Krakow Strolls, Kazimierz. Kazimierz, today one of Krakow's most atmospheric districts, was founded in the 14th century as a separate city. Established by King Kazimierz the Great, whose name it still bears. The monarch granted it wide-ranging rights and privileges, which quickly brought the new city to life. In its market square stood a town hall and trading stalls. There was a municipal scale and a salt depot, while Krakowska Street, a major trade route leading from Kraków all the way to Hungary, ran right through its center. Kazimierz enjoyed an excellent location. On one side it was protected by branches of the Vistula and the Wilga River, on the other by marshes, and in the late 14th century it was additionally fortified with powerful defensive walls. Thanks to the royal patronage, the city flourished, and by the Middle Ages it was regarded as the second wealthiest and most important city in Poland, after Kraków itself. It was then at the king's initiative that magnificent churches were built, the monumental Corpus Christi Basilica and the Gothic church of Saint Catherine of Alexandria. At the end of the 15th century, to the northeast of the market square, an autonomous Jewish quarter was established. Jews resettled here from Kraków, building their own synagogues and cemetery. Thus, Kazimierz became a place where two cultures and two faiths, Catholic and Jewish, lived side by side. The city's prosperity slowed in the 17th century, and the Swedish invasion dealt it a final blow, from which Kazimierz never fully recovered. Our walk begins where we ended the previous one, at the foot of Wawel, on the banks of the Vistula. This time, as we follow the river, we head toward Kazimierz, with our first stop at a place deeply tied to Poland's history and Christian tradition, the historic Skałka. Today it's a small hill, but in the past it was a limestone outcrop covered with vegetation, full of caves and rocks, located just outside Krakow's walls, yet close to the royal residence. It was here in the Middle Ages that dramatic events took place, which forever mark the history of Poland. According to chroniclers, Skałka was the site where Bishop Stanislaus of Szczepanów, later canonized in 1253 and venerated as one of Poland's patron saints, was killed. His conflict with King Bolesław the Bold remains shrouded in mystery to this day. The medieval chronicler Gallus Anonymus wrote that the bishop openly opposed the king, accusing him of cruelty toward his subjects. Some sources even claim that Stanislaus placed the king under excommunication, a gesture both courageous and dangerous. In response, the king ordered his execution, and legend has it that he himself struck down the bishop while Mass was being celebrated here at Skałka. The bishop's death shook the entire country, and a revolt of the nobles led to the king's downfall and exile. From that moment, Stanislaus became a symbol of courage and steadfastness in the face of tyranny, and his cult spread rapidly throughout Poland. Since the earliest times, Skałka has been regarded as a special place. Long before the arrival of Christianity, a pagan altar is said to have stood here, and in the 11th century the first church of St. Michael the Archangel was built. It was here in 1079 that the dramatic death of Bishop Stanislaw of Szczepanów took place. According to tradition, after his brutal killing, the bishop's body was dismembered and left on Skałka. The faithful secretly guarded his remains, mooring their shepherd in prayer. Then a miracle is said to have occurred. The torn pieces of his body were wondrously joined together again, restored the wholeness. In later centuries, when his tomb at Wawel was opened, the saint's body was reportedly found untouched by decay, entire and uncorrupted. For the faithful, this was yet another sign of his sanctity. For chroniclers of the time, it was proof that the martyr had become a patron of unity and the spiritual renewal of the nation. It was this miracle, along with other testimonies, that led to the canonization of Stanislaus in 1253 in Assisi. This was a moment of great importance. Poland, then divided into separate duchies, was given a patron who symbolically united the fractured land. From that time on, the cult of the saint became a bond linking all Poles, and his figure came to be seen as the protector of the entire kingdom. On the spot where the bishop's remains had been abandoned, a miracle spring gushed forth. For centuries, its waters were believed to have healing powers, soothing wounds, curing ailments of the eyes and skin, and offering health and strength to pilgrims who drank from it. Many carried the water home as their most precious relic. The spring still flows today, a reminder of the martyr's mystery and of a miracle's power said to heal not only bodies, but also the spiritual unity of the nation. The present-day church on Skałka dates back to the 18th century, enchants with its Baroque facade crowned by twin towers. Monumental steps lead up to the entrance, but before we climb them, let us pause for a moment. On the steps are inscribed the names of many outstanding Poles, creators, scholars, and artists who left a lasting mark on the nation's culture. This stone Book of Memory guides visitors toward the entrance of the Crypt of the Meritorious. The creation of the crypt was inaugurated in 1880 during the ceremonial reburial of Jan Długosz on the 400th anniversary of his death. The gesture was highly symbolic. It was Długosz, the great chronicler and historian, who in the 15th century brought the Pauline order to Skałka, permanently linking their presence to the site. He was also the first to be laid to rest in the crypt, beginning the tradition of burying here Poland's most eminent figures. For centuries, Wawel had been the resting place of kings and national heroes, rulers, military leaders, and great poets. Skałka, by contrast, became the resting place for those who ruled in spirit: poets, artists, scholars, and creators. Together, the two sites form an extraordinary whole. Since then, the crypt has become the burial place of figures such as Stanisław Wyspiański, Karol Szymanowski, and Czesław Miłosz. Skałka has thus grown into a true national necropolis, a complement to Wawel's royal tombs, and a place of memory and spiritual strength for Kraków. The Pantheon itself is adorned with works of some of Poland's finest artists. The polychromes and decorations were designed by Stanisław Wyspiański, while the sculptural settings, epitaphs and memorial plaques were created by leading masters of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The interior of the church is filled with symbols connected to the cult of Saint Stanislaus. In the chapel dedicated to the bishop stands a wooden stump on which, according to legend, he was executed, and on which traces of blood can still be seen to this day. Built into the floor is also a step, whose stone, tradition says, was soaked with the martyr's blood. These extraordinary relics drew pilgrims for centuries, who saw in them a living testimony to the martyrdom and sanctity of Stanislaus. It's quite remarkable that while standing by one church, you can already see another. From the Baroque church on Skałka, your eyes are drawn toward the monumental Gothic silhouette of the Church of St. Catherine and St. Margaret, founded in the 14th century by King Kazimierz the Great. As you approach the church, notice the narrow covered passage stretching above the street. This corridor connects the convent of the Augustinian sisters with their oratory inside the church. It allows the nuns to attend services while remaining in full enclosure, without ever stepping outside or coming into contact with the outside world. Such walkways are common in old monasteries, symbolizing the divide between worldly life and the spiritual realm. It was King Kazimierz the Great who in 1343 brought the Augustinian order from Prague to Kraków and settled them here on Kazimierz, granting them land for the monastery and church. According to legend, the king commissioned the church as an act of penance for the death of Marcin Baryczka, a vicar of Wawel Cathedral, whom he allegedly ordered to be drowned in the Vistula for delivering a bishop's curse. In fact, the Augustinians were already in Kraków, and Baryczka's death in 1349 came later. History and legend simply intertwine here. It's worth noting that the church has a unique double dedication to St. Catherine of Alexandria and St. Margaret of Cassia, both martyrs especially venerated in the Middle Ages. St. Margaret, Margherita in Italian, affectionately known as Rita, became one of the most beloved Augustinian saints, regarded as the patroness of difficult and impossible causes. Even today the faithful place notes and flowers by her altar, and on the 22nd day of each month, a special Mass and service are held here, during which prayers and intentions from Kraków, all over Poland and even abroad are read aloud. From the very beginning, the church faced serious challenges. It was built on soft waterlogged ground, causing the foundations to sink and the walls to crack. Many times the structure had to be saved. The walls reinforced, windows bricked up to lighten the vaults. Over the centuries, storms and earthquakes repeatedly damaged the roof, yet it was always rebuilt. Despite all these hardships, the Church of St. Catherine's has survived, and to this day it continues to impress with its Gothic architecture and light-filled interior. The church's spacious interior is a three-aisle basilica built in a pillar and buttress system. Its elongated presbytery is covered with a star-shaped vault. On the triumphal arch hangs a 17th century crucifix, surrounded by a wreath of angels holding the instruments of the Passion, crafted during World War II by Karol Muszkieta. Along the walls of the presbytery stand neo-Gothic choir stalls and a music gallery from the late 19th century. The multi-tiered main altar, dating from 1634, features in its central panel a painting depicting the mystical marriage of St. Catherine of Alexandria by Krakow artist Andrzej Venesta, framed by statues of Augustinian saints. The church also houses an exceptional tomb monument of Zbyszek Jordan, the Castellan of Kraków who died in 1568, one of the most powerful nobles of 16th century Lesser Poland. The work was created in the workshop of an artist influenced by the style of Santi Gucci. In the upper tier of the tomb lies a sculpture of Zbyszek Jordan himself, shown in repose. Beside him, seated figures represent his father, Mikołaj, on the left, and his grandfather, Jordan of Zakliczyn. These monumental statues echo the famous figures of Giuliano and Lorenzo de' Medici, sculpted by Michelangelo. In the lower section of the monument stand female figures, Zbyszek's wives, as well as his mother and grandmother. The whole monument is a remarkable work of art and the Jordan family's mausoleum. To finish, take a look at the low bell tower standing next to the church. Its massive, compact form resembles a fortified tower more than a slender church spire. It was built in the 15th century and was never meant to be taller. The soft, marshy ground would not support a high structure. Despite this, it served its purpose for centuries, as the buildings of Kazimierz were once much lower, allowing the sound of its bells to carry far across the district. Leaving the walls of St. Catherine's Church, we head toward another of Kazimierz's remarkable sanctuaries, the Church of Corpus Christi. As we walk, we cross Krakowska Street and make our way toward the wide Wolnica Square. Along this route, at number 46, once stood, according to legend, the house of Esterka, the fabled beloved of King Kazimierz the Great. Esterka was said to be a beautiful Jewish townswoman who captured the king's heart, and through her influence helped him open even more to the Jewish community within his realm. We arrive at Wolnica Square, the former market square of Kazimierz. From the very founding of the town, this was the center of its trade and social life. The present name comes from the Latin forum liberum, meaning free market, referring to the privilege of selling meat outside the city's butcher stalls. Over time, in the 19th century, the Polish name Wolnica became established. At the heart of the square stood the town hall, dating back to the 14th century, the seat of the city authorities and courts. The current building, which originates from the early 15th century, has undergone many reconstructions. After World War II, became home to the Ethnographic Museum, which still houses a rich collection of folk culture artifacts. While strolling through the square, take a moment to notice the charming fountain sculpture. Three musicians by Bronisław Chromy, a delightful reminder of Krakow's vibrant musical traditions. From Wolnica Square, we head toward the northeastern corner of the former market, where one of Kazimierz's most magnificent churches stands, the Church of Corpus Christi. Like St. Mary's Basilica in Kraków, it served as the parish church of the city, the main temple of the townspeople. It is no wonder, then, that it enjoyed the special care of the city council and the wealthy patriciate, who generously supported its growth and decoration. The origins of this church are shrouded in legend. According to tradition, its construction was inspired by a miraculous event witnessed by King Kazimierz the Great. A consecrated host, together with the monstrance, had been stolen from the Church of All Saints in Kraków during the octave of Corpus Christi. When the thieves discovered that the monstrance was not made of gold, they threw it away, together with the host, into the muddy marshes near the village of Bawul. For days and nights, mysterious lights glowed over the site of the sacrilege. When Bishop Bodzanta learned of the event, he ordered prayers of atonement and then led the solemn procession of the faithful to the site. There, in a miraculous way, the monstrance with the host appeared, and the bishop carried it back in procession to the Church of All Saints. Construction of the new church began at the end of the 14th century. In 1405, King Władysław Jagiełła and Bishop Piotr Wyż brought here the canons regular of the Lateran, clergy who lived according to the rule of St. Augustine. Their order took its name from the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome, where the first community had settled. Coming from Kłodzko, the canons took over the Corpus Christi parish in 1412 and have cared for the people of Kazimierz ever since. The church is a monumental Gothic structure consisting of an oriented church and a monastery, connected by a distinctive passageway supported on arches. It's worth noting that over the centuries, the ground level around the church has gradually risen, so today its surroundings lie slightly below street level, which is especially visible at the entrance from Wolnica Square. In the past, a parish cemetery surrounded the church in a tight ring of graves. It was removed only in the 19th century, replaced first by the cemetery in Grzegżółki and later by the Rakowicki cemetery. The magnificent gate and fragments of old tombstones embedded in the wall are the only remnants of that old burial ground. Crossing the threshold of the Church of Corpus Christi, we enter a monumental interior. A three-aisle structure with an elongated presbytery. From the very first steps, it impresses with the harmony between its Gothic architecture and Baroque decoration. In the main nave, attention is drawn to the numerous altars placed along the inner aisle pillars. All date from the mid and late 18th century, as does the pulpit shaped like a ship, a remarkably original masterpiece of wood carving. Its symbolism is rich. The ship itself is one of the oldest symbols of the church, rooted in the Gospels. The sirens beneath the pulpit represent sensual desires, the dolphins the soul's journey toward eternity. The whole bears the symbols of the evangelists, and the mast with its crossbeam symbolizes Christ. These late Baroque altars and the pulpit together give the interior its unique, deeply expressive atmosphere. special attention should be paid to the mannery choir stalls of the canons, situated beside the main altar. Their double seats are decorated with painted scenes from the history of the order and figures of Augustinian saints. They were created in the first half of the 17th century by two monastic artists, the woodcarver Stefan and the sculptor Maciej. At the center of the church rises the grand, richly gilded main altar, one of the finest examples of Kraków Baroque. In its middle section is Tomasz Dolabella painting The Nativity of Christ, also known as the Adoration of the Shepherds. Above it appears the Descent from the Cross, while monumental statues of the Old Testament prophets complete the composition. Interestingly, visitors today can still admire the altar in all its splendor. Just drop a coin into the box to illuminate it with spotlights and reveal every detail in full brilliance. Yet the true heart of this church remains the relic of the Eucharistic miracle from which its history began. Housed in a special reliquary is the monstrance with the consecrated host, miraculously found in the 14th century amid the marshes that once covered this area. For centuries, this relic has drawn pilgrims here and remains the church's most precious treasure. We now move on to the Jewish part of Kazimierz. It was here in the southern-eastern section of the town that the Jews expelled from Kraków settled at the end of the 15th century. At that time, across much of Europe, Jewish communities were being driven out of cities and confined to designated quarters known as ghettos. The very word ghetto originates from Venice, from the name of the old foundry Ghetto Nuovo, where in 1516 the Venetian authorities ordered Jews to live. From there, the term spread to other cities across Europe. The first records of Jewish presence in Kazimierz date back to 1485. Over time, a true Jewish town developed here, surrounded by walls and stretching between what are now Miodowa, Starowiślna, Wawrzyńca, Józefa and Nowa streets. The Jews were primarily engaged in trade and crafts. Around Szeroka Street they built synagogues, ritual bathhouses known as mikvahs, as well as schools, a hospital and an old people's home. The street, once called the Great Street, was the beating heart of the district, alive with prayer, conversation and daily life. After the partition of Poland in 1800, the Austrian authorities ordered all Jews to leave Kraków and live only within Kazimierz. But just a year later, the Senate of the Free City of Kraków allowed them to settle and trade throughout the city once again. The walls and gates separating the Jews and Christian quarters were demolished, and Kazimierz became an open, vibrant and colorful part of Kraków. That extraordinary world vanished during World War II, when the Nazis established a ghetto in Podgórze and exterminated Krakow's Jewish community. Yet today, walking through these streets, one can still feel the spirit of the past in the architecture, the old tenement houses, and the synagogues that have survived. Walking toward Szeroka Street, let us pause for a moment on Józefa Street, at the site of the former High Synagogue, Bożnica Wysoka. The word Bożnica is an old Polish term for a synagogue, used for centuries to describe places of prayer and study for the Jewish community. The synagogue was built in the second half of the 16th century, probably on the initiative of wealthy members of the Kazimierz Jewish congregation. It owes its name to its unusual layout. The prayer hall was located on the upper floor, above the ground-level shops, hence the name High. This was both a practical way to use space in densely built-up Kazimierz and a symbolic gesture, prayer rising closer to heaven. The interior was once adorned with Baroque polychromes and a carved bima, a raised central platform from which the Torah, the most sacred text of Judaism, was read. The Torah consists of the first 5 books of the Bible, forming the foundation of Jewish faith and law. The bima was the heart of the synagogue, a place of prayer and communal reading of Holy Scripture. Sadly, during World War II, the Germans destroyed most of the furnishings, and in the years after the war, the building gradually fell into ruin. A little further on, at 42 Józefa Street, stands the Kowea Itim le-Tora Synagogue, one of the youngest in Kazimierz, built in the early 19th century. Its name means "he who sets aside time for the study of the Torah," and refers to the tradition of daily study of sacred texts in special schools called yeshivas. In fact, it served as a house of study, a place where scholars and students gathered to study the Torah and the Talmud together. Although the building no longer serves as a religious function today, its modest neoclassical facade still reminds us of the students and prayers that once filled it every day. And so we arrive at Szeroka Street, the heart of the former Jewish Kazimierz. Once called the Great Street, it served as the main square and the symbolic center of this part of the city. Even today, it retains a remarkable atmosphere, a wide open space surrounded by low tenement houses, where traces of the old world can still be felt. On this street stands the Old Synagogue, the oldest surviving Jewish house of prayer in Kraków, also known as Stara Sztyra. It was built in the 15th century, probably founded by wealthy Jewish merchants from Kraków. Originally a small Gothic structure, it was rebuilt after a fire in 1557 by the Italian architect Matteo Gucci, who gave it its current late Renaissance form. For centuries, it served as the most important synagogue of the Krakow Jewish community. A place of prayer, meetings of the elders, and key religious and social decisions. During World War II, the Germans devastated the building and turned it into a warehouse. In 1943, 30 Poles were executed in front of the synagogue. After the war, the synagogue was restored, and today it houses a branch of the Museum of Kraków, dedicated to the history and culture of Krakow's Jewish community. Continuing along Szeroka Street, we come to another important site, the Popper Synagogue, also known as the Small Synagogue. It was built in the mid-17th century, founded by the wealthy merchant and patron of culture Wolf Popper, known as the Rich. He was one of the wealthiest Jews in Krakow at the time, and devoted much of his fortune not only to trade, but also to supporting religious life and learning. The Popper Synagogue was small, yet it was famous for its rich decorated Baroque interior and exquisite ornamentation. Unfortunately, in the 19th century, part of its interior was destroyed, and during World War II, the Germans completely devastated the building. After the war, it was rebuilt in a simplified form. Today, it houses a Jewish cultural center and bookstore, offering books, workshops, and exhibitions. Just a few steps further, at 40 Szeroka Street, stands the Remuh Synagogue, one of Krakow's most famous Jewish temples, still active today. It was founded in 1553 by Israel Isserles, a wealthy merchant from Regensburg and banker of King Zygmunt August. It was the second synagogue in Kazimierz after the Old Synagogue and was therefore called the New Synagogue in the 16th century. After a fire in 1557, it was quickly rebuilt, and its present form largely preserves the original design. Inside, the spacious barrel-vaulted prayer hall creates a solemn atmosphere. The synagogue takes its name from the founder's son, Rabbi Moses Isserles, known as Remuh, an acronym of his Hebrew name, one of the greatest Jewish scholars of the 16th century. He authored commentaries on the core code of Jewish law. Through his work, Kazimierz became a major center of rabbinical learning in Europe. Right next to the synagogue lies the old Jewish cemetery, known as the Remuh Cemetery. The plot for its establishment was purchased in 1533. Initially, it served as a burial ground for the victims of the plague of 1551 and 1552, and later became the main cemetery of Krakow's Jewish community. It is one of the oldest surviving cemeteries of its kind in Poland and in Europe. Despite the destruction caused by the Germans during World War II, many Renaissance tombstones may thought to have survived, richly decorated with symbolic motifs. Hands in blessing, pictures for Levites, stars of David, lions of Judah, crowns of scholars, and serpents entwined around physicians' staffs. On the tombstones, one can also see small stones left by visitors, a traditional sign of remembrance and prayer. Behind the synagogue, on the western side among the trees, is an iron-fenced section containing the graves of the Isserles family. Among them stands the tombstone of Rabbi Moses Isserles, Remuh, venerated by Jews as a miracle worker. The Germans did not dare destroy it, fearing Remuh's curse. To this day, Jews from around the world come here, believing that the resting place of this revered rabbi brings them closer to God, leaving notes with prayers and pleas for his intercession. After leaving the Remuh Synagogue, take a moment to notice the bench of Jan Karski. It commemorates the legendary courier of the Polish underground state, who was among the first to inform the world about the extermination of the Jews. It stands as a symbol of courage and remembrance of those who refused to look away in times of darkness. And now we come to the last synagogue of today's walk, the Tempel Synagogue. Located on Miodowa Street at the edge of the former Jewish Quarter, it is a place quite different from Kazimierz's traditional synagogues. Built between 1860 and 1862 by the Association of Progressive Jews. It became a symbol of openness and modernity. Unlike other synagogues, services here were accompanied by a choir and organ, and sermons were delivered not only in Hebrew but also in Polish and German. Designed by Ignacy Herzog, the building reflects the Moorish style, with decorative arches, rosettes, and a richly ornamented interior. During World War II, the Germans devastated the synagogue's interior, but the building survived and was restored in the 1990s. Today, it once again pulses with life, hosting prayers, concerts, and events of the Jewish Cultural Festival. From the Tempel Synagogue, let's head toward Plac Nowy, located in the very heart of Kazimierz. This place has a completely different atmosphere. After the spiritual quiet of synagogues and cemeteries, we enter a space full of bustle, aromas, and everyday life. Plac Nowy, laid out at the end of the 19th century, once served as the commercial center of the district. At its center stands a distinctive round market hall, the so-called Okrąglak, which for years was used as a covered marketplace for selling meat and poultry. Today it remains the lively heart of modern Kazimierz. Around the square, numerous bars, cafes and small restaurants create Krakow's famous street food hub. A place where you can taste almost everything, from the legendary zapiekanki to Jewish and Israeli dishes and flavors from all around the world. And so we end our walk through Kazimierz, a district where history, memory and modern life come together in one unforgettable experience. Kazimierz is a remarkable place where for centuries two religions, two cultures and two worlds, Christian and Jewish, coexisted side by side. It is their meeting that gave this district its unique spirit, filled with history, faith and atmosphere. Thank you for joining us on this walk and throughout our entire series exploring Royal Kraków. If you'd like to watch previous strolls, you'll find them all on our channel, featuring walks through the city's most beautiful corners. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next European ribbon walk. Do zobaczenia!